of the 31 Days of Culture. And I always say I'm super excited, but I am super excited today because we have someone who I've interviewed a few times, an expert in the customer experience space. We have Annette Franz on with me. So Annette, welcome. Thank you so much for doing this. And why don't you introduce yourself to everyone, kind of who you are, what you do, and all of that.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. And congratulations on the book. I'm looking forward to reading it. And I'm so excited about this conversation. I think that we really need to talk more about culture because I think too many people think it's just fluff and not really meaningful when it really is. But my name is Annette Franz. I'm founder and CEO of CX Journey Inc. I've been in this customer experience world for, 31 years and have spent a lot of time focusing on the customer experience, the employee experience, and corporate culture, and really how that is the foundation for all the other work that we do as customer experience professionals. So I started my career at J.D. Power and Associates back in 1992. What a great place to get this solid foundation for my career. So I've been running my own business for about the last 7 years. I've written 2 books, Customer Understanding, which is all about that. And the other one is Built to Win, which is all about designing a customer-centric culture. So thanks again, Chris, for having me, and looking forward to
what a great place to get this solid foundation for my career. So,
well, I've done it again where I've somehow got the feed going through there. I'm trying to repost so everyone can get in there, and I messed it up. Oh, well, I caught it quicker, much quicker this time. But listen, I really appreciate you kind of giving us the lowdown there and setting us up very well for this idea. So many people, I would say maybe so many leaders and business owners sort of look at culture as this, yeah, it's important, sure, right? And they kind of put a little lip service to it. And I noticed that as well with the customer experience, right? That they say, sure, I want my customers to be happy. Sure, I want them to have a great experience. And then they don't really do some of the things they should be doing. So let's maybe first talk about what's a great customer experience. What does that sort of look like for you before we kind of, I guess, maybe intersect the two?
Yeah. And you know what? I'll just start with the definition of customer experience, because I think so many people just now use that word or that phrase for pretty much everything, which it should be. And if we think about the business, it really should be. But I define customer experience as the sum of all the interactions that a customer has with a brand over the life of the relationship of the brand. And then probably more importantly, the feelings, the emotions, and the perceptions that customers have about all of those interactions. And I think, to answer your question about what a great experience is, I think we have to talk to customers to really answer that question and really understand their expectations. And we say today that their expectations, I mean, they're evolving and they're higher than they've ever been. And they've got various frames of reference that we don't even think about. We think about, hey, what does this mean for my brand or my product? But it's really, everybody's comparing your experience to the last great experience or last bad experience they had, whether it was in your industry or not. So, but I think to answer your question, customers' expectations today are that the experience is, it's a long list, right? It's seamless, it's frictionless, it's convenient, it's personalized, it's all those things. And I think that, and then some, right? It's memorable, it's all those things. And instant gratification is certainly one of the expectations as well. But again, the best way to know what they are and to stay on top of them and stay on top of them as they evolve is really to do the customer understanding work, which, I talked about in my first book, which is around listening to customers, defining your personas, and really talking to customers and understanding who they are and what problems they're trying to solve, and then mapping their journeys to understand how they interact with the brand. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer to answer your question.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's really important, again, because I believe that company culture, having a great company culture, is the only way for a business to reach its goals, for it to have what it wants, which I think is productivity, performance, profits, right? They want these things out of their employees. And then it's the only way for employees to get what they want, which is to have a great job, to be valued, to be heard, to be listened, to be secure, right? That they're going to be okay. They're going to have a paycheck and be able to feed their families and do meaningful work, and all these things that, all these different players want.
Yeah.
When the company culture is great, they happen, right?
Yeah.
And when the culture is bad, it doesn't happen. But to kind of go another level, I mean, culture impacts how employees feel. It impacts how employees act, how they make decisions. And then what are they doing all day? They're interacting with customers.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And so, it has such a huge impact. There's customer experience we might think about as like, okay, well, how does someone navigate an app? How does someone navigate a website? But the experience is also how they interact with employees, right?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. I always say the employee experience drives the customer experience. If we don't, and a lot of people will debate that, right? And say, oh no, customers first, put customers first. I don't know if you've ever read Hal Rosenbluth's book, The Customer Comes, oh gosh, I'm going to get it wrong. The customer comes second. There's something like that. But in his book, he talks about how the employee comes more first, right? The customer comes first, but the employee comes more first, because without employees who, design the product, build the product, sell the product, implement, install, service, all those things, we don't need customers because we don't have any of that, right? And so, yeah, absolutely, the employee experience drives the customer experience. And I go back to what you were just saying. It reminded me of a graphic that I have that links culture to business outcomes. I always say, fix the culture, fix the outcomes, right? So the graphic kind of goes like, in the first column is the culture. It's the foundation, the culture, the leadership, our core values, everything that we are. And that leads to, great experiences for employees. And when employees are, happy and engaged and productive and all of these things, then the customer benefits and the customer receives value and they're satisfied and they're loyal. It's much more detailed than that, but I'm trying to just stay kind of high level. And when you get all that, when customers get all that, then the business obviously competitive advantage, customer lifetime value, profit growth, all of those kinds of things, right? So fix the culture, fix the outcomes. I mean, there is really a clear picture from one to the other. And I love that. I think it's a really important thing for people to understand. As a matter of fact, this morning I shared a post on Instagram. It was a Simon Sinek quote, and it was, so goes the leader, so goes the culture, so goes the culture, so goes the business, right? And it's so true, right? It's just culture really drives business outcomes. And again, it's not fluff, it's real. It's real.
Yeah. I in the book, I kept one of the stories from the original version of the book. And that was, I think there's lots of great examples of different cultures, but even though Southwest Airlines has had a little bit of trouble with some of their software and logistical stuff, which has impacted the customer experience, I think they've been pretty consistent about, delivering a very specific experience for customers that they appreciate and they like. And a real core of that is how they interact culturally with their employees. And I remember I had some of their HR staff and head of people on the radio show a few times. And we talked about how, if their employee believes that they are doing the right thing for the customer, and they make a decision and they try something, they do something, the company will stand by them. They will never publicly say they messed up or they did something wrong. They will stand by them, stand by the decision. They may privately go back and retrain or say, maybe next time we should do it this way, right? And have that real conversation. But there's something about that, right? That you have a dispersed group of people trying to make decisions all day long. And you can live in a vacuum where you're constantly questioning people and making them feel like they can't make decisions, or you can empower them and say, we're going to have your back no matter what. We can talk about it later if we didn't like the decision you made, but we're going to be there and we put clients first and we put you first so that you can put clients first. Absolutely. Right?
Yep. I love that. And it's true. Southwest is always a great example of that. And like you said, I know they've stumbled with their technology a bit, but they really have that foundation to their business, the culture that keeps them, smooth sailing, literally.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any other examples, where maybe companies maybe shifted their culture a bit or shifted some bit of what they were doing, and there was sort of these noticeable changes as well into that customer experience, either positively or negatively? You may have examples of both.
Yeah, and I've worked with some clients where exactly that has happened, right? I've gone in and it's been, very much product focused, product centric, right? We're all about the product, and it's like, well, one of the principles that I write about when it comes to a customer centric organization is that people have to come before product, and there are a lot of examples out there. My favorite one is probably, I don't know, have you ever seen the video with Doug Dietz and GE Healthcare when he discovered what a pain the MRI is for kids? Great
Oh
video.
no, I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so.
Great video. It was a TED talk, and you have to watch it with a box of tissues, because when he sits and he observes, sorry, I've gone way off base on the question, but this just reminded me because this one particular client that I worked with was very product centric. And I use this example in the book too, is that, he goes in and he sits outside of the MRI room and just observes as parents bring their kids in, and how many kids have to be either sedated, which is never a good thing, or who just absolutely refuse to get in the machine because it's scary, right? And so he realizes that he never brought the person into the design when he designed this machine. He just designed this machine to do what it's meant to do without really even thinking about the implications of what it does, how it affects the human involved, right? And so he went and did a ton of research with kids to find out, what makes you feel safe, what makes you feel comfortable, what's fun for you, and all of that. And in the end, he didn't really redesign the machines, but redesigned the experience, right? Redesigned the rooms to be, to mimic, to look like a campground, to look like a pirate ship, to look like a circus, just these fun things that he had learned from kids that made them feel safe and the things they enjoyed doing. And in the end, after they did the TED talk, I forget how many installations they had. The kids would go in and they'd be like, "Hey mom, hey dad, can we do this again?" And like the amount of sedations that they had to do was cut down to like a minimum, right? I mean, it was just tiny compared to what they had to do before. And it saved the hospital too, in terms of, backlog and the rescheduling and all the things that they were dealing with too. Mm-hmm. And so really kind of goes down the line. So all of that to say, we need to think about the customer first and put the customer into our product design. And that's why I'll go back to the example, this client that I was working with, where they were very much product centric. They didn't really even they didn't even know who their customers were. I went and interviewed their leadership team and their employees, and they all had different answers about who their customers are and who they were developing the product for and who they were selling. And we went back and I, revealed the results to the leadership team when I was done. And they were just like, no, that we need to fix this. We need to make sure everybody knows who the customer is, and then they started to bring customers into the conversation so it was a real shift, and it came from the CEO down, right? And I think that's an important thing to talk about as well, is that, this type of culture is deliberately designed, and it has to come from the CEO, that they have to be the one to champion this culture and make sure that his or her, leadership team is all on board as well. And the turnaround was pretty amazing. The CEO sort of went on this roadshow and started talking about, here's who our customers are. Here's why this is important. Here's what I need you to do going forward in terms of bringing their feedback into everything we do and those kinds of things. And within a year to 16 months, we had that whole culture turned around, and it was pretty impressive. And it made a huge difference when it came to the product that they developed and the customers that they were serving. It just really, and the employees were happier too, because now they had a whole sort of, I don't want to say renewed purpose, but renewed purpose. They knew who they were working for, right? Who they were doing what they were doing for. So it was pretty impressive. And I'm sure there's tons of examples out there like that. It was a smaller company. I will say that probably, and you may have experienced this too, smaller companies and medium-sized companies a bit easier to turn around than the big guys are. But yeah, it can be done. Absolutely. But I think, it's got to be top down, and then eventually that grassroots groundswell picks up and employees jump on board because they see that this is important and they understand what's going on.
You really remind me of sort of two things. And one is, I remember when I very first learned about Scrum and I went and got certified, and really the whole basis of Scrum, why it was built, was because customers were telling, somebody or telling programmers, this is what I want. And then they would run off and they would go program it and do it, come back 6 months later or 3 months later, and either they got it wrong or the customer probably didn't articulate it correctly, or once they saw it, they were like, oh, no, the screen can't be yellow, it has to be pink, or this button has to be here. And they're like, why didn't you tell me that? And so the whole idea of Scrum is to just do a small iteration at a time. Here's a mock-up of what we're thinking. Is this right? Well, no, now that I see it, the button should be over there. Okay, do a little bit more, right? And so you're involving the customer into that, the design and what they want in that process, to really, really help them. And the second thing I was kind of reminded about was when our employees understand more about our customers and they understand the actual impacts that they have, right? That what a difference it makes in their ability to be more effective. And I've read many examples of this. I've seen examples of this with my clients where, like, for example, a call center, right? Or customer service team, they might be taking calls all day or making calls all day and talking to grumpy people, unhappy people, difficult people. But when we share with them, hey, this client had this outcome based on the hard work that you did to really help them get where they needed to be, they were able to solve this problem, their family was better off, they kept their job, whatever the outcome was, right? And suddenly employees get excited about that. They're like, wow, I know it was hard and that person was difficult, but ultimately look at the incredible outcome they had because I was patient, because I worked with them, because I did made sure their experience was great. And I think that's what it's all about, right?
I would agree. I have a great example that reminded me because, I define culture as core values plus behaviors, and had a client that came to me and said, hey, we have this real issue here. We have our salespeople, our frontline, our customer service folks, they're constantly butting heads with customers. I don't know what's going on here. They just they don't trust the customers. They constantly think that customers, they're returning things because they can, and there's just they just were getting upset with customers for all their requests and their returns and everything. And so we took a look at their culture. We took a look at their core values, and I said, let's think about adding a customer trust core value, and let's define the behaviors around that, really get them ingrained in get the employees to understand what that means and how that is a foundational element of our culture. We don't behave like that with our customers. That is just not even acceptable. What we want is for you to just trust what the customer is saying and doing, and help them. So we went through this whole process of defining that core value and educating, socializing it, making sure that employees knew how to operationalize and what that meant and what to do with it. And so I left and came back a couple months later, talked to my client, and I said, how are things going? And she said, it's just easy now. It's everybody gets it, right? It's just easy. And I think that's the power of culture. If we have that foundation, right? If we have this, even it's written, but even sort of unspoken word about what is right and what is wrong, we know what we need to do, and it guides us without anybody telling us. So I think that's an important piece of that.
Yeah. And I guess just, some of these things, they seem obvious, or maybe they seem obvious to us, but they're also noticed, they're obvious, and yet they take extra work, right? They take a little bit of extra slowing down and really thinking about what you're trying to do, or really stopping to listen. And it's so easy to just keep going and going and going and, doing all the same stuff we normally do, and then not create something better.
Yeah.
One of the things I talk about in the book is this pillar of positivity. So how do we look at the world in a positive way? How do we have positive leadership? It's an important factor for great cultures. And one of those sort of tenets is built around appreciative inquiry, which says, we focus on what's working. We try to find discoveries and find things maybe inside the chaos where, something is going well, something is working, we're having a good experience. There's an employee who's really killing it. And how do we go and get really curious about why that's happening? How do we do more of it, right? How do we maybe innovate from that? And but it takes that little bit of, I guess, being curious and doing a little bit of extra work that we don't see from everyone as sort of a baseline, right? It's not something they do maybe consistently. And I don't know if that's what that sort of sounds like what you are suggesting, or that's what you saw your clients do, or that's what maybe the journey that you took them down, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a great example, a great analogy there. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And really that positive leadership stuff. I mean, that's how do we say yes, right? How do we do more again of what's working? But I don't know. It's like the other thing is, we can, if we have a client who calls who's really angry at us and is upset about something. Typically, and I see customer service people doing is like, how do I get them back to not mad, right? Yeah. They were happy and now they're mad, and how do I get them back to happy? And with the positivity mindset, it's not only can I get them back to happy, but how do I get them maybe even happier than they were before they were angry?
Right. Yeah.
And you have to get really curious, and you have to ask questions, and you have to validate what's happening and get, really try to figure out and say, whoa, maybe there's even a better way. Now that I really understand your problem, now I really understand what's going on here. Maybe the solution we had in place for you isn't going to work, and we're going to keep seeing this issue happening. We can make this even better. Yeah. Right. So I'm not just going to get you back to not mad at me. I'm going to try to take you to ecstatic with me. Yeah. And that's a mindset that takes, I think, some bit of training. It takes a little bit of help, right, for our people to do that. Is there other ways, are there strategies that you have heard about or used or whatever that, to help our people, help our employees kind of have that kind of mindset, to get curious, to get in there, to want to dig a little deeper, and figure out what's really going on?
Well, interesting that you asked me that, because I was going to ask you, how does hiring for culture fit play into that, right? Because I think that's a big part of it. We talk a lot in the customer experience and customer service worlds about hiring for culture fit, having the people who are already sort of predisposed to doing just that. So how do you relate hiring for culture fit to that?
Well, hiring for culture fit, is tricky, because you want to find people that are aligned to the values and aligned to what you're trying to do, but you also don't want to get a bunch of more people exactly like the people you already have. Yeah. Right. And so it's a challenge, because what we can do is say, well, this is a good culture fit because they went to the same school I went to, because they like the same sports team I like, because they live in the same city, whatever. Right. And that's not what we're talking about. And so you have to get really, really clear about what's the value I'm looking for here. Exactly. I used to put, into, when we talked about goals for people, we had goals that sometimes people thought were silly. And I was like, it should be a goal that I want to see that you are actively helping other people in the company. Right. And they were like, that's part of my job. Yeah. If you're not a person who can't spare 5 minutes to do a favor for somebody, right, to help us be better, to help us, solve that issue. If you're not a person who wants to collaborate and help and do a 5-minute favor for somebody, I don't want you here. That's not the kind of company we are, right? And that's different for different companies. Yeah. But that goes back to a core value, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But they can be wildly different in how they think, in their education, and their upbringing, and everything else. And I don't have to try to hire a clone of the last 10 people I hired in order to have that value come through, right? Yeah. I agree with you. You have to be very clear on what culture fit means. It doesn't mean we're hiring a bunch of people that look the same and sound the same and talk the same and went to the same school. It's very much aligned with, and I always say with your core values, right? And I always say that if you think about your friend circle, do you hang around with people whose values are vastly different from yours? Probably not, because you probably wouldn't get along, right? You'd probably and be looking at those people going, what are they thinking, kind of thing. So to me, that's really important, that people are very clear on what it does mean to hire for culture fit. It is not, what we just said, it's not. So Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess with everything that sort of happened, and there's been so much change, and there continues to be change. Some people are getting more flexible work, some people are getting
Yeah.
less flexible work. And certainly the economy is different. I mean, there's a lot kind of happening and going
Yeah.
on. Do you think that that's kind of impacting companies right now and their ability to drive culture, to drive customer experience, or is that just noise to, just another thing they have to deal with?
In a way, I do think it's just noise, right? I think that it's an excuse not to stay the course and do what you got to do, know that what's right. I get a lot of people that say, oh, well, this whole work from home thing and 3 days a week or 2 days or whatever it is, it's a challenge for culture, but culture isn't within a physical building, right? Culture is how we do things around here, whether you're in the office or you're not in the office. So I think a lot of that is noise and just an excuse for not being able to stay or not focusing on staying the course. And I think that the same thing with the employee experience and the customer experience. I mean, I've worked from home for the last 23 years, right? Prior to starting my own business, every company that I worked for since 2000, I worked from home. And, I ran teams and I made sure that, with my teams, the culture was what it was, and we continue to maintain that. And there are different ways to do that. You don't just, you've got to communicate, you've got to keep people together, you've got to do the things, the rituals and the habits and the things that you do to build that culture to begin with. And like I said, they're not necessarily tied to a physical building. So I think a lot of that is just noise, because I think people don't get, going back to culture is fluff, and not everybody understands the importance of the customer experience that needs to be done. Customer experience and employee experience, same thing. You can still make sure your employees have a great experience when they're not in the office, or when they're in the office a couple of times a week. The employee experiences, I would say the employee experience is the hard stuff, and the soft stuff and the hard stuff. The soft stuff is, let's communicate openly and transparently. Let's make sure that they get feedback and coaching. Let's make sure they feel empowered. We're focusing on their well-being. They know how their work contributes and matters. None of that stuff has to happen in a physical building, right? And then the hard stuff is making sure that they have the tools, the resources, the workspace and workplace and the training that they need to do their jobs and to do them well. I had a client years ago that, when I first start working with clients, I'll interview the leadership team and employees and customers. And I was interviewing their employees, and they're an HVAC authorized dealer. And so I was interviewing some of their field technicians. So these guys aren't in the office. They may come in and load their trucks and, get their, appointments for the day and stuff, but they're not in the office. But when I talk to them, one guy said, and he said it, and I quote him, and everything that every time I bring this up, I'm like, he said, you know what, we just don't have the tools and the resources and the training that we need to serve our customers the way that they need to be served. Boom. I mean, that's the employee experience, and employee experience drives customer experience in a nutshell right there, right? So again, another long-winded answer to your question, but I think that I think there is a lot of noise there. And I think that if people would just, leaders would just sit down and understand that connection between culture and employee experience and customer experience, it would be a lot easier for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking some time to chat with me today, talk
Absolutely.
about customer experience. I always enjoy chatting with you. So hopefully people will consider checking out the book. It comes out October 31st. There is a lot more in-depth sort of discussions around the things we've been talking about. Now we're 12 days in, right? And I'm just we're itching our way to Halloween for the trick or treat for the book to come out. So I really appreciate all your support and for chatting with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, and congratulations again on the book. I'm looking forward to reading it. I'm sure it's going to be awesome. And I encourage everybody to grab a copy for sure. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.